Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling like I've got a lot of things I got to get off of my chest. I've got to dispense some thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel?
I'm doing okay.
Oh, just okay. Well, that's the end of the episode,
okay.
folks. So, Rachel, we are here to give our thoughts on the first season of Star Trek.
Lower Decks.
Yeah, Star Trek Lower Decks. After all, there's only one season. We want to give our thoughts on it. As discussed in some previous episodes, Lower Decks is one of those modern Star Trek shows that is currently out, but it's the one that we definitely don't feel like we have anything to say about it on an episode-by-episode basis, but it definitely is worth discussing. It is a very interesting show, to say the least, and so we are here to give our thoughts on it, aren't we, Rachel?
Yes.
So for people who have not watched Star Trek Lower Decks and are at all interested, watch it for yourself. We are going to talk about the spoiler aspect of the show. This show does have plots and reveals and character arcs and a whole bunch of stuff, as well as just, you don't want to hear us sit here and dispense the jokes out and you go, well, I'll see the show for myself. And then you've already heard the jokes and you're like, well, that wasn't very funny. I already know this joke. I heard some podcaster half retell the joke, so it's not funny. We are here to talk about it, spoilers and all. So, Rachel.
Yes.
Star Trek Lower Decks, the adult animated comedy show set in the Star Trek universe.
Were you excited on that premise?
No, it was, out of all the new Star Trek shows, this is the one I feared the most, and I did not want the most. My initial perceptions of hearing this idea was just like, oh, we're going to do this. Okay, we're going to have an adult...
Okay, we get it. Rick and Morty is really popular right now.
Yes,
but do we need this to exist?
I was very fearful of this. I have a real weakness for adult animated comedies, especially Western ones, because a lot of them hit similar beats of humor and similar beats of structure and character types, and I really didn't think that we needed a Star Trek version of Rick and Morty or of the TV show Archer or American Dad or Family Guy. And I was very, very, very upset when I saw the trailer for the show. The trailer for the show Star Trek Lower Decks was, to me, god-awful. And having now watched the entire season of the show and rewatched that trailer, it feels like somebody who hated this show constructed it to give it the worst kind of representation, because I'm not saying that Star Trek Lower Decks is a perfect, marvelous show, but it is far better than those initial promotional materials led us to believe. And those materials and the character designs and the yelling, the constant yelling, really made me upset. I felt like, oh, now Star Trek is dead. We finally reached the point in which there's nothing we can do with Star Trek now, so let's just do a Rick and Morty show of Star Trek. And I thought, wow, we've really reached the death rattle here, the creativity, the imagination. We've run out of stories, ideas. We have milked Star Trek for all it is worth, and here we are now with Star Trek Lower Decks, which is just a Rick and Morty clone.
Part of me wanted to say, guys, if you were getting a Rick and Morty of Star Trek, then thank your lucky stars, because Rick and Morty fucking rule.
Yeah, what's the fucking problem with Rick and Morty? Yeah, suddenly now that's a fucking problem.
That's what my initial thoughts were when I heard the pitch, saw the character designs, and saw that trailer. I did not want to watch this show. I knew we were going to have to, but I did not watch it for quite some time, and there's a reason for that as well we'll get into, but I did not want to watch this show. The only reason I really did tune into it is because I heard from people I respect that the show gets good as it goes along, and it's one of the better Star Trek shows of the modern run, and I was intrigued by that, but the idea of this show disgusted me. I hated the concept of it. I thought Star Trek doesn't need a show within its own universe that is just mocking the franchise, because Star Trek is a show that does its own mocking itself very well, and also the classic thing of, how many decades has Star Trek been on, Rachel? Several. And how many TV shows and comedians and people have come about and made the same fucking jokes about Star Trek that Lower Decks has done? So many. So I was already fearful of it being tired and old. What about you? What was your feelings on it? Because you, out of the two of us, are very much tired of interacting with modern Star Trek.
Yes, and I am also tired of American adult animated shows, specifically the comedies, because...
No, there are only comedies. Most of the adult animated shows in America are just comedies.
Rare. There's rarely anything other than a comedy. But
there's no just sci-fi shows.
No, I just wanted to specify because in the previous decades there have been other style genres of animation shows that have been produced by the US.
Yes. They're either for children that are surprisingly mature, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or you get the adult animated stuff, or whatever The Simpsons is in between that.
And whatever Daria is classified as now.
Whatever Daria is classified. But so you...
I was not keen. I shared the similar hesitations that you just outlined. And then when I actually saw the trailer, it looked disgusting, as well as having no humor or redeeming qualities to me.
How is it disgusting to you? What do you mean by that? The look of the show, the type of humor it was going for, what it was doing to the Star Trek legacy and brand, what was disgusting?
More so the first two. Like, I was accepting that this is what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a show that's in Star Trek, that is Star Trek, making fun of Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, most of these jokes are going to be ones that I've heard before. What I wasn't expecting was for so many of the references to not make any sense within the show.
We could talk about that.
But that's for later. Initial responses. So I did not like the character design.
No.
It did not grow on me. I think the quality of the animation is really good. I do not like the way that the characters are designed. The background shots, the space,
The ship,
the ships,
the colors,
all of that I do like. But the actual way that the characters are designed and the cohesion in the way that they are designed, do not like looking at anybody's faces.
So you were not impressed. I was not impressed. Then we were superly not impressed because we are not gracious and lucky enough and bestowed the honor of being born and living in the Northern American areas, because although it's easy to forget this now as we've gone several months since this initially aired, the rest of the world was not given Lower Decks easily to watch. It was not available on streaming services. We would have to pirate the show. And to be honest, I did not have the amount of effort to do that.
VPN.
Yeah, no, because you have to still have a CBS All Access account. And I'm not doing that. So the thing is, Star Trek Lower Decks hit right around when a lot of the craziness of the pandemic was happening, and for some reason or another, it felt like at the time there were several excuses of what was going on, but the be-all and end-all was the rest of the world could not watch this show that easily without having to go to other means. It wasn't available on Netflix, it wasn't available on Amazon Prime or any of those.
The long and short of it is that for some reason CBS could not or would not internationally distribute Lower Decks for several months.
And it did feel like that whoever was in charge of the distribution and promotion of this show hated this show, because I can only speak for myself, but I grew to despise Lower Decks before it even came out because, one, I didn't like the look of it to begin with, like I just said. All that stuff I just said. But now, on top of it, oh, I'm not even allowed to fucking watch it? We're in the modern age of television in which everything's very accessible. Everything's on all these streaming services. We shouldn't have to wait months later for us to be able to watch the show. And by then, we've already been spoiled on everything because it's been discussed everywhere online. It's hard to avoid, especially if you're someone who's interested in Star Trek. You're going to have people talking about all these references and, oh, did you know this character came back? Oh, did you know Riker was in the show? Did you know Q was in the show? By the time Star Trek Lower Decks came about, to my ability to actually watch it without having to pirate it, which I did not do. I was not interested in doing that. I was like, if it's going to come out, it's going to come out, I'm going to watch it, and that's what's going to happen. By the time it did, I had this festering rage because it felt like you are not worthy of watching our animated show, and or they were embarrassed by the show so much they didn't want anyone to see it. So
it also gave us an extra reason to not watch it because we weren't interested in it as well. Like, we were just like, fuck you.
And this is not...
You look like shit, fuck you.
And I want to say this. This is not the fault of the actual show itself. But this is a part of the viewing experience and our thoughts on it. The lead up is very important to a show sometimes. And the hype, the promotion, the distribution, we take all of this for granted once we've watched the show and once we actually have it easily accessible to us. But it did affect my experience watching this show. It never affected me with Discovery or Picard, because if I didn't like their trailers, I just go, they're trailers, and I'll watch it when it comes out on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and then I'll judge the show on its own merits. But then, Lower Decks, it felt like they were really trying to sink this ship before it could even set sail. It was just such a bizarre thing to do.
I can say that I was very surprised how long it has taken, but we are aware of it. It is clearly something that we want to have happen.
Then we actually did get to watch it months later. When Australia got given the ability to watch it, we watched it. And I knew for a fact that the first 2 episodes are the weakest for many people. They aren't the greatest. Stick with the show. It starts to pick up around 4 or 5 episodes in. It gets better and better as it goes along. I knew that. And I told you that, Rachel. But that did not prepare me still for how fucking terrible those 2 first episodes are. I will say it. I think those first 2 episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks are probably the worst episodes of modern Star Trek that I've seen. They insulted my intelligence. It was hideous to look at. I didn't like any of the characters, any of the stories. None of it was happening for me. What about you? You got told those first 2 episodes are rough, Rachel, but it'll get better from here. But what did you think?
I liked the idea of Second Contact.
Yeah, that feels like it's going to be the whole show's idea.
As an episode and as a possible premise for the show. But there was so much yelling.
And references.
So much stupidity. And it felt like it didn't trust that it had a story to tell.
No, and to me, although they used the animation, this really did feel like a group of podcasters improvising what a Star Trek plot would be. And doing dick jokes and screaming references and making each other laugh. But I wasn't laughing. No. And it didn't warm me up to the characters or the universe of the show. And the thing is, it was everything I feared and I didn't want. The trailers were accurate for those first 2 episodes' level of quality and level of humor and tone and all of that. And I thought, I thought the trailers were bad, but now the show is bad. It was so bad to us that we just stopped watching Star Trek Lower Decks for like several weeks, maybe like 2 months flew by, because those first 2 episodes were like willingly putting poison in my ears. I despised those first 2 episodes. So much yelling.
The The second episode is really odd in a variety of ways in terms of, like, poor quality of jokes, in our opinions.
Laziness.
Yeah.
Animation not being used to its full potential. The character's weak.
Yeah, but the main problem that I have with the second one that we haven't brought up yet, because there's a very long list of problems with these episodes.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the plot of the second episode, Envoys, is?
Is that the one with the crystal people?
I can't remember if it's the crystal people or not. It's the one where, like, Mariner screws up a little bit and starts to question herself, and Rutherford quits engineering.
That's right, and he tries to do every other job.
And job hops.
Job hops, yeah.
Both of those premises
could be interesting.
If we fucking knew these characters at all.
That was such a big thing of those first two episodes.
It was just like, what the fuck?
It really did feel like it was trying to do a ham-fisted and rushed introduction of all these characters, whilst also treating it like, you know who they are. I'm like, like, who's Tendi? I don't know.
Why do I care that Rutherford's not in engineering? Because it's like, it's never in doubt that he'll end up back in engineering.
I don't know anything about these characters or this crew.
Like, I don't care.
Or the show. I still am trying to figure out what the show's thing is. So those first two episodes were very, very abrasive.
Almost every single decision in those first two episodes we had a problem with.
One of the episodes just ended with the main character screaming lists of things that happened in previous Star Treks, just list of references, and that's how the episode ended. And that meant to the writers of the show, they left their best material for last, and it was the weakest material in the entire show.
Shameful, in my opinion. Shameful.
That really did. That moment sent a cold shiver down my spine, because this is, and I'm still
the trip sprinkles.
No, that's later in the season, where a character says, "I like a Kirk Sunday covered in Trip Tucker sprinkles." I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck that means as a statement. Like, I know there's two characters, but when that final scene happened in that first episode, where she's just rattling off all these references, and then it went to credits, a cold shiver went down my spine, because to me it felt like, oh. Even with the animated series,
this is it.
This is the first time I've watched a Star Trek episode that didn't feel like it warranted being an episode of television. This really did feel like a group of podcasters screaming off while drunk and improvising. It did not feel like it deserved to be a production of a television show. The first Star Trek episode I've really ever felt that for. And the second one, the exact same fucking feeling. And we stopped. We stopped for several weeks, almost maybe months, and I was happy for quite some time. But then people said, Ryan, Rachel, you got to give it more of a chance. It gets better. It gets better.
And by better, they meant that half of the season is semi-decent, a quarter of it is irredeemable, and a quarter of it is meh.
Which is, you know what, I'll take that.
That doesn't equal a yum-yum. Yum-yum.
We're railing on what the preamble and the beginning of the show was like for us, but how do you feel about the show? What's your general feelings on it? We've watched it all now. We've taken quite a break since we've watched it to talk about it. What is your general feelings on the show?
Now, after all of that, you want me to explain how I feel about the show now?
Yeah, we've watched the entire thing. Those first two episodes are abrasive, but you know what it's like to watch a television series. Not all of it's going to be great. Sometimes it starts out rocky and it gets better. Star Trek Next Generation's first season is absolute stinking garbage. But does that mean TNG's an absolutely stinking garbage show? No, it doesn't. So...
No. For me, though, Lower Decks, two main adjectives that I would pick to describe my current feelings towards season 1.
Yum,
No.
I had to say it.
I know.
Somebody listening was saying it, and I heard them, and I said it on their behalf, and that's why we get paid the big bucks.
I hate you. Okay, now I've forgotten what my actual two were, but let's go with dull and aggravating.
Okay. What makes it that way for you? So you're not a fan of Lower Decks?
No. Like, there are parts that made it not torturous to watch, but nothing that made it feel like it was actually good to me. There were, as the show went on, there were more things that I was like, oh, that had potential to be something. Especially after the atomic bomb disasters of the first two episodes. But there was never anything that I felt was like a really solid episode. Like, we got solid scenes, we got some more interesting storylines, but we never got like the full package.
And what would make the full package for you with this show?
I don't think it can, because so much of its identity is screaming is funny, and I don't find screaming funny.
But if it toned down the screaming, would it, like, what is the full package to you? Like, do you want this to be a more, like, comedically sharp show? Do you want it to be more of a dramatically driven show with the comedy being lighter? Do you want it to be more Star Trek-centric in terms of sci-fi stuff and character interplays? What makes it a full package?
Okay. Well, they would need to change the character design. Like, just that's a fact, because I just really don't like it. They would have to change the style of humor to being, hey, look, a reference, to a reference actually being a payoff for a setup that they do, and the setup is something interesting that is not them yelling something.
Right.
Those are some building blocks that would send it.
And you don't think the show managed
elevated.
to fix up those kind of issues as it went along?
Not entirely, no.
Not enough.
No, and I don't know how much of that is just because it dug itself into such a hole with those first two episodes. I don't think it was ever going to be good in my eyes after those first two episodes.
You had a hard time forgiving it for slapping you in the face twice.
No, like, it KO'd me with those first two episodes. So I'm not going to trust it after that. Fuck no.
I'm a lot more forgiving of shows when it
are.
comes to this stuff because, again, Next Gen started out terrible and insulting and absolutely bad. And let's not pretend that DS9 started out like it was a picture-perfect show either, as well as Voyager. And I love all of those shows. And, well, Enterprise, that's a discussion for another day. But I grew with this show. I felt like it did get better. I got told around 4 or 5 episodes. I felt like it got better around 6 episodes in, honestly. And that's far too many to slide by. I thought that the humor got a little bit sharper. I thought the characters were starting to grow into actual characters instead of machines to yell and make references and jokes. I felt like the characters were breathing.
The episode that really turned me around with that particular point was the one where Mariner goes on the movie escapade.
Her therapy session
On the holodeck.
And that's kind of a part of that story's whole journey is it's grabbing this main character who's been a prick the entire time and shaking them by the shoulders and saying, "Wake the fuck up, Mariner, stop being a dickhead." And from that point, she does grow, and that's kind of the point being made there
It felt
in
like
that
it
episode.
mattered that happened with that character in that situation and in that way. Whereas a lot of the other plots didn't have that weight to them. And in some animated shows, like, you expect nothing to be important and for everything to
just be a gag.
Reset at the end of the episode, and it's just for the funnings in that episode.
You expect it to be as two-dimensional as the actual images on the screen.
Yeah, but Lower Decks, in a lot of different ways, tries to appeal to either end of the spectrum.
Tries to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah,
tries to be two-dimensional, just light gags and fun, but also tries to be an emotional, character-filled arcs are here, stories develop.
Season-long arcs and overwhelming emotional moments and relationships and family drama.
But did you know Khan exists? And that's what will happen. What you just did there, you're trying to talk about all this emotional stuff, and then someone will say, Khan had a big chest.
It crashes itself.
But to further talk
so many metaphors going on.
To further talk about my feelings on it, I did feel like it got better as it went along. A lot of the weaknesses that I have with the show did remain until the end, but they felt like they were being lessened, and it felt like the show was gaining more confidence within itself. The references became less annoying over time, and not because I had become accustomed to them, because I didn't, but because they eased up on them or were starting to use them in a far more clever manner. The yelling was used in a more precise manner. They figured out a rhythm for it. The characters started to actually be able to be themselves instead of these machines that dispensed all of these references and jokes and physical gags. They started to get more confident with how to use the animation, not just for humor, but for storytelling and action and the sci-fi aesthetic. They started to delve into some actual interesting science fiction plots. They started to get better with...
Decisions had purpose.
They started to get better with integrating storylines with one another. It started to feel less like A-B storyline, while they still did maintain the A-B storyline nature. I felt like they got better as they went along, but not to the point in which I would say that this is a great show. It is a show that I would describe as it has potential. The next season, they need to get their shit into gear. This was really reminiscent to me of the show Final Space. And that show's first season has a lot of interesting stuff in there, but the weakest aspect of it is its comedy getting in the way of good characters and science fiction stuff, and that's what this has going on. I like Star Trek Lower Decks. I grew to like a lot of our main characters and side characters. I grew to like the aesthetic. I grew to like some of the storylines, but the comedy was still the weakest aspect to me, and that's a big no-no in your comedy science fiction show. But I grew to appreciate the show, and I am looking forward to more of it, but I think they need to get better with their scripts, comedy. They just need to sharpen their tools and follow through on the promise. There's potential here, but I'm not going to give it points just because it has potential. Discovery had potential, and look where that went.
You're kind of like the bomb, huh?
Is this one of the best modern Star Trek shows? Yes, but I don't know if that's the highest of bars.
It's faint praise.
We're talking a lot about the animation, the character designs. I am on board 150% for an animated Star Trek show that is an actual Star Trek show. We had the animated series back in the day that was for children, but they had insane science fiction ideas that their budget could not bring to life, but they still did it anyway. We have this show that is just trying to be an adult animated comedy show like Archer, but in space. I am 100% on board for a real grounded sci-fi Star Trek show that happens to be animated. I've always thought you could easily make a Star Trek thing and crew live in the animated space because animation frees up the potential that is there that has been restricted by the budget. And we see that in Star Trek Lower Decks. There's so many creative visuals and aliens and science fiction ideas that have been brought to life and can only be brought to life as easily as it is because of the animation. And I am on board for an animated Star Trek show that takes itself seriously and has the budget to actually bring to life the science fiction ideas that they write down, unlike the animated series. The animated series had ideas, but they just did not have the time or the money. While here, they have the time and the money, but they're focusing on making it this, let's be honest, run-of-the-mill comedy show. I am on board for the animation. I think it looks great. I think the spaceships look great. I think the designs of the planets and the textures, I think that they make the animation look great with action. I think
But
they do.
what about our characters?
Well, that's the weakness, but I think they do a really good job of mixture of 2D and 3D animation.
Yeah.
Really good.
The animators are nailing it with what they given.
I love the color of Lower Decks. I love the
vibrant,
but not too like wink wink nudge back
Not-
to the 60s kind of
not
aesthetic.
garish
Yeah, it doesn't feel like, although the show makes
or retro.
the show makes visual references with its animation, like the font choices being very
yeah.
TNG and a lot of it feeling TNG and Deep Space Nine at times. It doesn't feel like with the color palette, it's as overtly winking and nudging at like it's like TNG or it's like the original series.
It does have its own style.
It has its own feel to it, but the character design is where we both agree the animation falls apart. But what do you think about the idea of an animated Star Trek show? Do you think it could be something that
there
has...
is a lot of potential there. There's a lot of freedom with animation that you just don't get with other formats. But for the most part, it doesn't matter that the show's animated. And then slowly as like they go on, it feels like they were like, oh, we're running for an animated show. We can do this. And we can do this. And, oh, we could do this idea from this other Star Trek show, but in this way that, like, the technology didn't allow because we're animated.
That is something, the animation, it felt like the animators halfway through the show knocked on the writer's door, went, hello, you know that we can actually make jokes with our visuals, right? And you can actually, like, use the fucking format of animation to make this show funnier and more interesting than it is, because it really did feel like halfway through the show, somebody flipped a switch and realized, oh, this is an animated show and we can really embrace the animation. It really did feel like that, like especially that episode where they're on the trial and they're recounting all of the events. Every single segment there, it was like the animation was doing a lot of the legwork there, and that is so good because for the rest of the time it's just
fun.
For the rest of the time it's like a Family Guy thing where they're just standing in one place and just talking back and forth, and then it'll cut away to something silly, and it was like, okay, why is this even animated? But what about the character design makes it all fall apart for you? Like, what's wrong with it? Because it looks serviceable.
Yes, and ugly characters in animation can work.
Duckman.
Let's all get up and get down by doing the funky Duckman. You let your down, and thrust your pelvis, and thrust your pelvis, and thrust your pelvis, and thrust your pelvis,
But even when, like, you first look at a character like Homer Simpson, it looks unnerving.
Yeah.
And you get used to it and you accept it. Because, and a part of that for me is because you get to know the character and the attributes that are within their character design start to make sense.
Yeah.
They are representing parts of the character and making them feel more fully developed.
Or it shows that the person who came up with the designs has a unique voice of their own, hence something like the Phineas and Ferb people. You know exactly who drew those characters because they have their exact style. Same with Matt Groening. You know exactly that Futurama is made by the same people who did The Simpsons.
Yeah.
You look at it and you go, yes, but here with Lower Decks?
It's a weird place of it just feeling bland and like these characters could be changed slightly and plopped into so many other shows. And the lack of personality in the the way that the characters are designed.
I think it's the betrayal. There's a betrayal here where the pitch of this is, like with a lot of modern Star Trek, is this is a new type of Star Trek that you haven't seen. We swear and have sexy time, just like Discovery and Picard. Oh, wait, that's not different. But we're animated. Oh, well, the animated series is that. But we're an adult animated Star Trek that's self-reflexive and meta and makes all the jokes. We're unique. We're different. Okay. And then you look at the design and it looks like every fucking other animated show. It looks like Final Space. It looks like Archer. It looks like Rick and Morty or Star Opposites or Close Enough.
The character design plays it so safe in a show that is proclaiming to be
different.
Edgy
and different and unique. Yet you look at the characters.
And it's just like, okay.
If you removed the Star Trek iconography from the characters, meaning the uniform, and just put them in some jeans and a white t-shirt, showed them to a random stranger, they would not be able to tell you that's a Star Trek character. Like, you could give them a fucking Star Trek alien and put them in a different outfit, like Tendi. Show them Tendi and make them guess that it's a Star Trek show. They wouldn't be able to fucking do it. Because there's nothing unique to them as a design. Like, its design hasn't made you go, that's the Star Trek animated design. Because that unique character design is so specific that I know it's a Star Trek show. Like how if I look at Archer, I know that's Archer, even if I've never seen the show, because that design is so iconic. You know. But here, they're just so typical and tired, and it is a reason why it's hard to get attached to a lot of the characters for us, because I just look at them and go, you look like you were a background animated character for a Rick and Morty episode, and they just brought you here. Like, there's nothing particularly standoutish about you.
When you have somebody online telling you in the same breath that your animation style is something they've seen before, but they also are draping themselves in anime and love anime.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, like, I'm sorry that Lower Decks doesn't look like anime.
I like the intro, the introduction of the show, like the credits, the opening credits. I think it's really fun.
The theme song is solid, and it feels like it fits the show.
Yeah, the music overall in the show is very decent. I think it's the best music in modern Star Trek. I think it stands out more than Picard's music, and I think it stands out less than Discovery's music. So it's a win-win.
Like it's there. It makes sense and it fits the scene and it supports it without drawing too much attention to it or trying to make the scene even more melodramatic.
Although it's calling back to a lot of previous Star Trek music, unlike the character design, the music itself has such a unique personality that feels like it came from this specific composer. Yes, it's pulling on a lot of beats from old school tracks.
It's pulling in the motifs without feeling like it's just a regurgitation.
It still feels like there's someone's unique fingerprint on this music, just like how Jerry Goldsmith's music is different to James Horner's music, but both of them, you can believe, take place in the same franchise.
Yeah. Somebody made the music. It doesn't feel like it was designed by committee.
It didn't feel like it was designed to manipulate my emotions as overtly as Star Trek Discovery, or to put me to sleep like Star Trek Picard's. The music...
Oh, boy.
The music's a character of its own. Like, some of the humor really does derive from what the music's doing in the background, and not like it's just doing the comedy music, boom, 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 boom. But sometimes the juxtaposition of the visual stupidity going on the screen and the seriousness of the music did get some smiles out of me. I don't know if that ever happened to you. I get that type of humor always kind of gets to me.
Yeah. I appreciate it because it's like, Oh, they put some thought in.
They did. I will say,
I like it when they put effort into their show.
there was a moment, though, that took me out of an episode, and only I care. Nobody cares about this. I haven't seen anyone talk about this online. Only I care. There's an episode where Mariner is there's an episode in which Mariner has to do all the dirty, gross jobs on the ship, and the music that kicks in is almost, if not exactly identical to the theme from Death Becomes Her, the movie with Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
It is so fucking blatantly inspired. It's temp music,
It's
if anything.
weird.
It's like they had the temp music and they just dropped it in, and the guy said, I'll change a few things here and there, but it's basically the same.
Yeah.
I would love to play them side by side, but obviously they'll be copyrightable. But just take my word for it. It is bizarrely similar, and I don't know why. It's not like Death Becomes Her is composed by a composer who's worked on Star Trek even. Like, at least with that, I could understand. But no, Death Becomes Her has nothing Star Trek related to it, so it's just a weird thing to pull from. And it's only come to my attention. I've looked up online and no one's talked about this. And I'll concede that I'm reaching, but to me, when I heard it, it immediately took me out and made me think of Death Becomes Her, a movie that has nothing to do with Star Trek Lower Decks.
Ernest! My ass! I can see my ass!
There's something really wrong with your neck, too.
We don't really like the jokes in this show.
It has its moments where the comedy hits, where the jokes hit, but Star Trek Lower Decks' comedy, when it actually tries to be
style,
is not for me.
No.
It is very much not for me, but it does make me laugh from here to there. And it's what makes me laugh about the show isn't the references or isn't the overt yelling gags or a lot of the humor. What does make me laugh is the character interplays. I think the dynamics between the characters are really fun. I think characters like Rutherford and Tendi bouncing off each other are really fun, or Ransom and Mariner bouncing off each other are really fun dynamics. I find that to be the stuff that brings me the comedy, and the use of animation, and the use of the fact that this is a television show. The way that they use every now and then the fact that the swear words are censored to play into comedy is something that I find really palatable, and I find harkens to my sensibilities. And again, when they lean into the absurdity of the sci-fi plot rather than the absurdity that Star Trek has had absurd plots, when they actually lean into their own plots that they've come up with in their own episodes and let the characters who are interacting with that plot bounce off of it with a comedic sensibility, that I enjoy far more than them screaming out gags or them saying, like, did you know that there was an episode of TNG, blah, 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 with this character? Did you know Kirk's Sunday with Trip Tucker Sprinkles?
I concur.
Yeah,
I concur. Like, there's not much that I want to add to that because you very succinctly summarized our thoughts on it. Because we do have fairly similar senses of humor and appreciation for things.
Yeah.
For the most part. And that is pretty much just the way that I feel about it as well.
Do you have a standout moment of comedy in this comedy show? Any moment that you think back on and you go, that gave me a chuckle or a smile or an out loud belly laugh of any kind? Is there any jokes in this joke show that has stuck with you?
I can't think of any. The only moment that came to my mind when you asked that question was not necessarily like a joke, but it's the episode when Ransom and Mariner are on that planet,
the Crystal Planet, and they're debating over which one of them's going to get to sacrifice themselves by
which one's going to fight in the arena.
And I remember laughing
a solid good chuckle when Ransom just stabs Mariner.
Yeah, that was good. I really like that too. I also like how the show uses violence for comedy, because comedy needs to start doing that again. Like, it's okay to use violence to make people laugh. And the way that they would implement violence in this show was always a surprise, because you have the visual of the shows looking nice and pretty, but then they'll get into gruesome, bloody violence with things like Badgie. Badgie is one that makes me laugh. I like the concept of Badgie.
Yeah.
I like how they
I
implement Badgie.
thought we were going to have our own little segment on Badgie.
Badgie will get his own Badgie-da. But my comedy came about, there was a few that I laughed at quite a lot. One of my favorite gags, I don't know why it got me, was there was a standoff between the ship and this other alien race who, they were basically scavengers, and they wanted these parts of these old Starfleet ships, and the fight broke out with the fact that this alien ship was just using their tractor beam to throw trash at them, and our main characters are running around and they're doing the usual Star Trek thing where the ship will shake about and our characters will fall over and everyone's screaming, but it's all because they're getting trash thrown at them. And I thought that was a genuinely amusing gag, and I thought it was a fun little thing of, oh, this is cool, someone's using tractor beams to attack someone. Again, I thought that was a clever play. Nobody stood there and said, they're using the thing that we use in the Star Trek universe called tractor beams to blast us in the asshole, beep, and all of that. I thought that was a clever one. I also really liked the plot where Tendi made a dog.
Yes.
But she doesn't know what dogs are. She has no concept of how they work or what their function is or their personality is.
That subplot.
And that one really embraced the visual gags of the show. Like, I got my biggest out loud laugh was when the dog ran past them and then quietly turned into a solid, like, titanium cube and then just kind of rolled out of the room, and nobody really, like, reacted strongly to it. It's like, that just kind of happened. And that's what made me laugh. I love the absurdity there. I love that they're using the sci-fi nature with the animation there, and the fact that it's just such a nonchalant thing. It was one of the times where I didn't feel like they were pointing at it.
They're making it funny because it's this show with these characters in this format.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, make it matter that this is your show.
Yeah, but there was quite a few gags that did ring my bell. I think Tendi and Rutherford were the ones that got me a lot of the laughs in the show, as well as the actual bridge crew. I think that the captain and Ransom are pretty funny. I wish the Doctor had a few more better gags. Her kind of character, I feel, is a bit lackluster. Like, you could do so much more with her.
We get it. You're the cat version of Polanski.
Yeah. We get it. You're that version. You're the cat version of her. But I also loved... the gag was ruined, but I love the gag anyway of Ransom ripping off his shirt and the lighting changing around his muscular body, and he's doing the Kirk double punch. I loved that until he said out loud that he was doing the Kirk double punch, and then I rolled my eyes and said, you know, the visuals were telling us what you're referencing. Like, I think most people who aren't even into Star Trek famously know that Kirk would roll and do the double punch and the shirt off. Like, I think that's a pretty iconic staple that you don't even need to know that that's Kirk that did that. You just know that's a sci-fi trope at this stage. I thought that was a bit bleh, but the whole trial episode, that was a funny episode. I loved that episode. I thought the uses of the framing device to tell these little stories that all interconnected, and the absurdity that was played with Rutherford's one in particular, where he kept waking up in different scenarios.
It was fun and funny. And it's like, this is what it should be all the time.
Another one that got me was with Tendi. Her whole thing was she wanted to be in the ready room to clean it. And they assume that they're going on their secret mission, and they're like, you're the cleaner, right? And she responds being like, oh, yeah, I am. The typical misunderstanding. But then she goes on the mission, and she's like a super badass, but she still thinks that she's there to be a cleaner, because then at the end, she's back in the ready room after this amazing secret mission in which they've kidnapped this and attacked Romulans here and all this, and then she just goes back to cleaning. the ready room, and she's like, yes, finally, I'm back here.
Yep.
I love that optimism there, and it's like misplaced, like it's supremely hyper focused on such a specific thing. That brought me a lot of joy. And one of the reference gags that did make me laugh was when Boimler got the transporter accident and he was stuck.
Yeah.
And they used the gag that people can hear the transporter noise that is always made when they get transported out. And the fact that that was an annoyance for everyone, that nobody wanted to interact with him because he was constantly making that noise.
Yeah.
Fun, because it was integrated into the plot and it was a recurring issue that they had to overcome. That was great. I loved that. That was a fun one. But nothing really stood out to you in the laughs department. What about Riker turning up at the end?
Riker and Troy were fun.
They were fun.
I liked seeing them and their crew and knowing that they're a part of this version of Star Trek. And I'm like, I would love to see a show with just them.
The show's heavy on the reference humor. We are not big into shows material being just referential. It's very
we like things to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, we like the show to have more substance than just references. But were there any references that stood out to you that were used effectively? Because that is a part of why they're used. They're trying to use them to garner a laugh or comment on Star Trek's ways of telling stories or character tropes or any of that stuff. We have a show here that's just nothing. A lot of it is just references. Was it used to any beneficial means for you?
Okay.
Any standouts?
I have to admit something at this point, which I think has been made fairly clear. I've forgotten almost everything about this show already.
Why?
Because it is so darn forgettable.
What's forgettable about it? Because it has all these unique things going on, these characters, these gags, these episodes, these plots. How can it be so forgettable to you?
I don't care about any of it. I don't care about the characters. I don't care about the stories. I don't think anything in the moment is going to matter. And that's why you're asking me all of these questions, and I'm like, I know that I did laugh at things and that there were references that I enjoyed more than others, but I can't remember them anymore. And it's not like we finished watching it a super long time ago.
No.
It's just because it was so void of substance that I'm just like, no, I don't need that in my brain.
Well, that's the thing. Let's talk about this. What do you think the show's intention is by design? Do you think it's trying to just be light, fluffy entertainment that goes in one ear and out the other? Like, it's there to entertain you when you watch it, but it's not supposed to linger in your brain? Or do you think it's trying to be more than that?
I think it is just trying to be 20 minutes of you get to switch your brain off and then just move on. I don't think this is designed to be anybody's favorite show.
Well, people do have those shows as their favorites.
Yeah.
See, we like to have shows linger with us after we've watched it. That's what makes shows to us great shows. Shows that still live in our brains rent free. But I don't know if I could comfortably say that Star Trek Lower Decks is designed just to be a throwaway show, because the second half of the show starts leaning into the drama of the characters and arcs and plotting and setting up next season. I don't know if it wants to be just a show like Archer, I keep bringing it up, or American Dad, or Family Guy, in which you'll get a laugh or two while you watch it, but it's not going to stick with you for very long because they're there just for light entertainment. They're there just to make you laugh, not much else. Because Star Trek Lower Decks is trying to make me feel and think about things, and I don't know if it's the betrayal.
Yeah,
is that a betrayal of what the pitch of the show is, or is it's finding its identity late in the game, thus it's forgettable to you because for the first run of it, it's just light?
The first season does evolve.
Yes.
And a part of its evolution is that it moves away from the, like, this only matters for 20 minutes to this is going to have lasting impact in the back half of the season. But I guess for me, it's not just the, like, you just watch it for the 20 minutes and forget about it completely.
Yeah.
It's, you don't think about it until you watch the next episode or another episode. Like, it's not designed to create much discussion outside of it, but it's designed to keep you interested enough that you come back to it.
Right. Yeah, I know. I understand that.
So thus, like, we want to see some change, some development in our characters because they've shown interest in changing or developing, or they've drawn attention to the fact that these characters are staying the same in a way where it indicates that they have an awareness that this is a problem that they should probably overcome.
Yeah. I want the show to embrace the depth that it could have, but I think it's doing the trick that a lot of comedy shows tend to do nowadays, which is 70% of it is light, fluffy nonsense that you watch and then it's over and you move on with your life. And then the back half, the 30% of it, is character stuff, drama, fulfillment of the desire of having watched the show. The depth is presented to you to make it feel like
have everything in a way.
To make it feel like the show that you've watched the whole season is a lot more impactful than it really is. I've seen so many shows do that. Brooklyn Nine-Nine does that. I swear every time Brooklyn Nine-Nine's final 4 episodes feel different to the rest of the season. Of each season feels different to the rest of the episodes in the season because it feels like they're making you think that the show's deeper than it actually is. Or same with Final Space as well. That show does the exact same thing. Like, and I wonder if this is what Lower Decks is doing, and I hope that it isn't that. Again, this is the one season. We can only judge it on this. But its final few episodes feel like it's doing that trick of, it's fluffy at the start, but then the final few episodes make you think, ooh, I can't wait to see more and see these characters grow and the show get grittier and more and more. But then you'll watch the next season and it will be light and fluffy.
And
it'll
to the start.
Reset the pattern. I've seen so many shows do that, but we'll have to see when the second season of the show comes out to see if it will do that trick, or if it will actually do what Final Space has done, which is Final Space was faced with this dilemma. Do I go on the road of being light, fluffy, garish entertainment, or I go on the other road to being a deeper character study show that still has humor, but more focus on the drama? And that's what that show has been doing. In its second season, it leaned more into the drama. In the third season, it's leaned even more into the drama. It still has humor, but it's different to what it was when it started. I don't know. But I hope...
Only time will tell.
Only time will tell.
It is a really small galaxy out there. Sooner or later, I'm going to run into you, and I'm going to feed you to an armis. You hear me?
Hey, Psycho, keep it down. We're trying to sleep.
Oh, shut up, Jen.
The thing about the show, Rachel, is it has characters... and it has episodes, and we could talk about...
Yes, it does have those things.
We could talk about, like, what are our favorite characters and what are our favorite episodes.
Are we not going to do that?
The favorite episode is the Badgie episode.
Yeah.
It's the one that made me understand what the show was trying...
The introduction of Badgie.
Yeah, the one where he goes crazy.
Yeah.
And the other plot is the one with Fletcher trying to make himself super smart.
Yep.
That felt like where the show should have started.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought that's where the show's identity came into being.
And I think that it would have been really funny if they set Fletcher up to be the main character, and then in that episode they do the bait and switch and they give you Boimler instead, because that's part of what Boimler is like, is that he's like the substitute, like, oh, good enough.
Yeah, I think what makes the Badgie episode work is it's using the format of being meta, but playing around with it where it's its own unique sci-fi story. We've seen Holodeck go crazy lots of times before, but having the idea of the Holodeck equivalent of Clippy goes crazy, and you see them trying to run away from him by jumping into different holodeck scenarios to avoid him. That was fun. That was unique. That felt very fresh. It used the animation, and it used the notion of the show of looking back at the legacy of Star Trek and enhancing upon it and making fun of it and prodding it. It felt unique. And then the other plot with Fletcher being the dumb guy who causes the ship to get fucked up because he makes the computer try to make him smarter, but then it goes all crazy. That's such a Star Trek plot on its own, but that character, Fletcher, was such a fun, unique character that it made it work. That's where the show really picked up steam, and the characters seemed to really to lock in, because we've got our 4 main characters. What do you think of them? Who's your favorite? Who's your least favorite? What is your opinions, and do you want to follow them more so?
I would be quite pleased if Boimler and Mariner were just left and we switched to Tendi and Rutherford being the main characters.
What about them do you like so much?
I like their stupid levels of optimism about being part of Starfleet, and the way that they get beaten around in the episodes with their jobs, but they're so happy to have that happen to them.
And the juxtaposition of the bridge command crew and other crews on other ships being far more cynical about what it's like to be in Starfleet.
Yeah, like they're just not jaded. And it's a fun juxtaposition because these are the naive characters within the world, and the universe itself is jaded.
Yeah, I think that's a lot more fun to follow than Mariner is a dipshit that is on purposely a dipshit because success is scary and does not have the confidence to be a leader, so self-sabotage, and Boimler, who is, I think, the most useless character in the entire show. There are one-off characters who are far more interesting than Boimler.
So common with, like, the central male characters in comedies.
Boimler has nothing going on. I don't think he made me laugh once. I think the closest he had to being useful was when he had that giant speech at the end of the trial, and then he ruined it by screaming, "Drumhead," because I remember that episode of Star Trek. And it made my eyes roll back and remind me, oh, that's right, Boimler's annoying and useless. But I think that Tendi and Rutherford, I agree, are the heart of the show. Their optimism. They actually like one another. That's the thing, too, of our 4 characters. I don't believe in their friendship or camaraderie with one another. I believe it because the show has put it there. But I actually believe Rutherford and Tendi being friends. They have mutual interests. They actually respect one another. They actually listen to one another when they have disagreements. They're big enough to actually stop for a moment and listen. They have the far more out there plots, but also plots with stakes to them sometimes as well. Like, yeah, they get the silly plots, but also they'll get the Badgie plot, and then Badgie will come back in the final episode, and it's like a big deal. And also, both of them are the outsiders to me far more than Mariner and Boimler. One of them's a cyborg, and one of them's an Orion.
Yeah.
You instantly, and that's the pitch of the show, right? Lower decks, these are the outsiders, these are the lower decks, these are the people who are looked down upon by the rest of the ship and society. These are the outsiders, and you have one who is a cyborg, he's, got a disability, and one who is an Orion, who the show even comments upon the stereotyping of Orion women as sexy slave women. And the racism inherent that people have against the Orions as a people. I think they could lean more into that. I think they could lean more into the Tendi and Rutherford being actual outsiders aspect in this show that's supposed to be leaning into that. Because for the majority of it, we have Mariner, who's an outsider because she chose to be, because her mum's the captain and her dad's an admiral, and Boimler's an outsider because he's just incompetent and nobody likes him. But I don't even know why nobody likes him. He's so boring that he doesn't even offend me. He's just there.
He's not even effective at being a brown noser.
No.
Like, and that's meant to be kind of the joke, is that he's trying to be a suck-up and he fails at being a suck-up.
Yeah, and the bridge crew are all fun. I think the captain's great. I love Captain Freeman. She's wonderful. I love Ransom. I think that he's got the Kirk mixed with Riker thing down pat to a fucking T. I think all of the voice acting is, across the board, pretty great.
I like Shax.
Shax was fun. Are you upset about Shax still?
Yeah.
He did have one of my favorite reference jokes, which was when I think he was beating up the Packlids, and he was kicking them, and he's just like, when you get to hell, tell the Pirates that I sent you, which is a nice gag because I remember the Pirates, ha ha ha, I remember them. But it's like, that one worked because it's like, well, he is a Bajoran. They've been making jokes about him being a Bajoran, so fine, that one works. It's like, in universe, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Not like them saying episode titles. That's weird.
Hated that.
Can we talk a bit about our main character, Mariner?
Yes.
I like Mariner when she's what I would say is the competent, real version of herself.
Yes.
Far more than the one we got in the entire show. When we got the glimpses of the Mariner who's an actual Starfleet officer who has her shit together, I actually want to follow that character, and I actually want to see her on missions and succeed, and I guess that's kind of the point of the show is you know that she's competent underneath it all, but she's got to get out of her own head and get off her own baggage and fix up her mummy issues, and then she'll be the confident character. It's an arc. But
they're going to tread water with it for so long that I'm not going to care about it.
But the thing is, there's been many characters who we want to see grow and develop and succeed, even though they start off as annoying characters like the Doctor in Star Trek Voyager. But the thing is, the Doctor in Star Trek Voyager was a fun character I liked when he first came on screen. Mariner, I hate the stupid, jokey reference machine Mariner. I really do like the Mariner who was on the mission with her friend, and her friend told her to get her shit together. I like the Mariner that fought the Vindicta. I like the Mariner in the final episode. I like that character, and I hope that season 2 they follow through on that while still maintaining the goofy elements that we were given, but I hope that we get her to be far more of a straight-laced protagonist, because honestly, every time she came on, my eyes would roll. What about you? What about Mariner?
Yeah, I feel fairly similar. Like, I don't trust that they're going to do anything interesting with her. At this stage, I'm like, oh yeah, they could do something. I don't know if they will or they won't, but it is frustrating each time she goes back to being the fuckwit.
Because we've seen it so many times in TV shows before, and it's rarely, if ever, entertaining to watch. And I don't know. Do you think that the show is going to sink low enough and dumb enough and just bland enough that her and Boimler are going to actually have a romantic
at some point,
tit for tat, and or there's going to be a love triangle, and or he's going to actually outright be in love with her, but we can't tell her. Are we going to actually do that?
At some point, they're going to do some version.
Who enjoys that? Who enjoys that? Does anyone fucking enjoy that? They don't have anything in common. Why would they like each other other than she's the
attract?
Oh, because she's the girl and he's the boy. Is that the only reason? Like, Tendi and Rutherford, I could see having a genuine romantic thing in the future because they actually have fucking things in common.
Yeah, but then they also kind of
they like each other. And
they deal with that romantic sensibilities with those two characters.
Yeah.
Like, they address it and move on.
Also, because even though Tendi and Rutherford are kid-like, they're far more mature people than
odd. It's like,
Mariner
yeah,
and Boimler.
Tendi and Rutherford feel like they actually went through the academy.
They feel like adults who are just a bit silly, while Boimler and Mariner feel like characters.
Oh, Boimler, not you!
Ransom's picking someone to promote to the Sacramento. I need an edge.
Dude, I thought you were done being lame!
Yeah, but it's the sack. That's a huge career boost. And didn't you say you'd get me in a captain's chair?
Mariner! Looking good, girlfriend.
Get phased, Lundy!
And let's talk about Boimler. There's a whole episode dedicated to him via the title.
To do about Boimler.
What a milquetoast vanilla, bland as fuck character, huh? Why is he even here? I say no. I say no. No to Boimler.
What? What about him?
Here's my pitch. Here's my pitch to the show. You already said it briefly. Fletcher, that character.
Yeah.
Remove
swap him
Boimler.
out.
Remove Boimler. Have Fletcher. Fletcher was a far more interesting foil and character. He could have been the guy who caused a lot of issues for our crew of people because of his overt anxiety and stupidity. His characterization, Fletcher, his character faults and his good traits were far more clear to me in that singular episode than Boimler's entire run. Boimler's a character that I would describe as, even trying to register what he looks like, he's a blur. It's like there's a shape there, but I can't make out what this is.
He's there. He's drawn. He speaks. He does things. I still don't fucking give a shit.
It's a very stock standard type of character. The brown-nosing guy who knows all the regulations, but nobody respects him. It's a very tried and true character. But what you need for characters like that to work is you need a specific performer, and more importantly, you need that character to have something wholly unique and about them that draws our attention, whether they be charismatic. What I'm saying is, Boimler is a brown-nosing failure who knows all of the rules and wants to be ambitious enough to go up the ranks, but is too incompetent to know how. One of the greatest sci-fi comedy characters who fits all of those things is Rimmer from Red Dwarf. But what makes Rimmer work in comparison to Boimler is that Rimmer is an actual prat that nobody likes, that makes him endearing to us because he genuinely hates himself. He has a mental state that I can understand as a viewer. I hate myself. I understand that. He hates himself. I understand that. He has an actual life that I can go, okay, I understand why you are the way you are. He
feels like a person.
He has a rationale as a character, while Boimler, he's just a character who has those typical traits that make up this type of character and nothing else, other than maybe they'll give him a romance plot in the future. But other than that, what's he got?
The Cupid arrow, whatever. Episode.
Oh, yeah, where Mariner was jealous?
No, when Mariner has a girlfriend. I mean, Mariner is jealous of Boimler because he has a girlfriend, but the girlfriend's actually in love with the parasite.
Oh, but you see, Mariner wasn't actually jealous. She was just suspicious because who would be in love with Boimler because he's so fucking dull?
Yes.
And his name is Boimler. Ugh. I think you just eject him from the show and bring Fletcher back in. I thought Fletcher was a far more engaging character.
Doesn't Fletcher die or something?
No, Fletcher gets transferred to the Titan and then he gets kicked out of Starfleet because he's too much of a fuck-up. I think you could easily bring him back. I think that Boimler is a waste of space of a character. Because really, what did Boimler do that added to the show for you? What was so only Boimler could have been the one with the transporter accident happen to him.
Nothing good.
Nothing.
There are some things that, it only makes sense for him to do it, but I would prefer that those things didn't happen.
You know what's a sin of the show?
What?
They had Q in this show as a cameo.
Yes.
I know that they've said that they're going to bring him back for a full-on episode.
They should have just done it from the start.
I was so fucking pissed off with that because it showed us in a brief clip what a whole episode of Lower Decks with Q in it could have been, and it made me mad that we weren't getting that.
So much more fun.
And it's just kind of disappointing because Q just kind of shows up like, hey, you know I'm Q, right? I felt like if you're going to have Q in your animated show, which is the perfect environment for Q to live in because he has these powers, you have to dedicate a whole episode to him. Not just have him as a wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, nudge in an episode that has nothing to do with Q. That enraged me to tears because I knew he was in it, but I thought he was going to get a plot. But instead, he's just there for the sake of being there. At least when Riker and Troy showed up, they had stakes. They added to the scenario going on. They had a previous relationship with the antagonist. They mattered to the final episode. And they were built up because we heard about the Titan leading up to that. And we as viewers know that Riker is the captain of that ship. But Q is such a great idea to bring to life via animation, and they fucking wasted their first shot. They need to pick up their game next season. They better not dick us about. They need to have a full-on Q episode.
Yeah, they should, but I don't know. I don't know if they will.
Other than Q showing up, are there any other previously established characters in Star Trek you would want to see pop up in Lower Decks as anything, like whether they play them off as just a comedy thing or they actually expand upon like anything? Is there any previous stuff in the canon or characters in particular you would like to see show up next season?
See, there are some that I'm like, oh, I would really love to see them again, but I also don't trust the show. Like Naomi Wildman.
She would be fun.
She would be fun.
Other than Q, I only have two. One of them's like a genuine one that I think they could do some fun with, and one of them's like a throwaway little reference one that would be like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The Doctor. Bring back Robert Picardo as the EMH. Obvious choice. The EMH is such a like great thing, and Robert Picardo's still around, and his voice is still great. Easily bring him in. That's like an obvious 101 that seems so obvious to me. The fact that they haven't done it already is absurd, but hey, here we are. Bring him back.
You still got your shot.
And the second one is, for me, there was a character played by the guy who does Gul Dukat. Even though Gul Dukat is no longer with the character is no longer with us, he also played another Cardassian in a TNG episode that had a mustache. Or had, like, facial hair in the first episode with the Cardassians. Bring him in. Just so you can have this actor play that character again. But it's just, like... Because that's just, like, a fun little one. Where it's, like, people love...
Harry Kim appears and he's still an ensign somehow.
Oh, you have multiple Harry Kims because it's all the ones that have died.
Yeah.
They go to heaven. There's all these Harry Kims up there waiting for you. But yeah, I think there's a lot
to do. There's a lot of fun to be had.
I think there's a lot of fun you could have. Hell, I would love to even see that little alien kid that Riker found on that planet that made him think that he was living in the future. Remember that episode? The one where Riker told Picard to shut up? And you're lying. Remember that? And he just cuts at the end. It's like some weird bug alien guy. Bring that kid in. What's he up to these days? There's a whole road of potential with Star Trek Lower Decks, and that's the thing. I think the future of the show is still yet to be determined. I think that they have to decide where they want to go. The show has I feel it has an identity crisis at the moment. I feel like it has its eggs in these baskets over here and these ones over here. I think it needs to decide where it wants to, it wants to be. Does it want to just be light, fluffy entertainment forever, or does it want to be a bit deeper?
It doesn't have a clear purpose, and we've circled back to that idea a few times. With all of these things that we've brought up, many of them being negative and most of the positives being faint praise, does it end up being a yum or a yum yum?
I like the show. I do. I think it's engaging. I think the characters are getting better. But it's just not there yet. I think that
It's not enough.
This first season did some work, but I think for me to say that this is a good show, the second season needs to prove itself. This first season on its own, I do give it a yum.
Yeah. It's a yum from me too. There isn't enough good things. There's not even enough trust in the show that they will do good things in the future for me. So it's definitely a yum.
Yeah, it's a yum for me also just because it's a comedy show and I didn't find it all that funny. And the damning statement to be made is, this is a Star Trek comedy show, yet it was never as funny as when actual episodes of Star Trek were actual comedies.
Yeah.
This did not make me smile or laugh as much as any of the Ferengi episodes from Deep Space Nine, or the Tribble episodes, or even that episode where Bride of Chaotica didn't make me laugh as much. The thing I'm saying is, Star Trek of yesteryear has been funnier than the actual Star Trek comedy show. So
Yeah.
I can't responsibly say that this is a great show because its
No.
pitches, it's a comedy.
No.
Because its identity is it's a Star Trek comedy show, yet it's not as funny as Star Trek comedies of the past. Which is bizarre to say because Star Trek isn't a comedy series. It has comedic stuff in it, but the fact that Star Trek 4 is still more absurd and funny than the animated Star Trek show that's supposed to be absurdist and funny is a damning statement all on its own.
I am from what on your calendar would be the late 23rd century. I've come back in time to bring 2 humpback whales with me in an attempt to repopulate the species.
Well, why didn't you just say so? I mean, why all the coy disguises?
If people want to share their thoughts on the show with us, how would they go about that, Ryan?
We are on the social medias of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit. We are YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast, so you can follow us on there, hit us up on there. We have our email, yumyumpod@gmail.com, in which you can email us.
If you want to help us earn more of those big bucks.
If you want to hear more our thoughts on.
As well, you can check us out on Patreon under YumYumPod.
YumYumPodcast.
Or YumYumPodcast.
It's all in the description of this episode, so do go away. Let us know your thoughts on Star Trek Lower Decks. Best new Star Trek show, grounded in a real-world setting, or absurdist genius? Is it a deep show for you? Is it just
Boimler?
Yeah, no. No, Boimler can go to fucking hell. Boimler can go out the fucking airlock. But were we too hard on the show? Were we not hard enough? Are we? Who knows? You can tell us. Let us know your thoughts. Well, that's it, Rachel. I think the only way to end this episode is to end it like Star Trek Lower Decks. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan exists. Did you know that, Rachel?
Yes, I did. Did you know that Khan had a big chest?
Trip Tucker sprinkles on a Kirk Sunday, Rachel. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Did you know that?
I do not know what that means, but yes, I did.
Oh, Rachel, I've got a joke for you. Do you want to hear a joke?
Yes, Ryan, tell me a joke, please.
Did you know Captain Kirk would do a double fist punch? Did you know that?
That is a thing that I know, and I find amusing.
I got another one to end us on. This is the best joke that we could ever come up with. This is such a clincher. You're going to be laughing from side to side. Your sides will crack open.
Are you going to start yelling, Ryan? Because you know how funny I find that.
Oh, wubba-dub-dub-dub. No, the funny joke that I want to tell you now is, did you know that Riker has a beard?